Can you please explain again exactly how this project update came up with total funding available of what, $20.4 billion?
Yeah. So consistent with our 2016 business plan and 2018 business plan, we had ranges of what funding can come in, mainly due to the fluctuation of cap and trade every year. So in this project update report, we really focused on two scenarios. We have a low scenario, which is about $20.4 billion. And that basically scenario is saying that cap and trade will come in at about $500 million a year. We have a high scenario that assumes that cap and trade will come in at $750 million a year, which brings that up to $23.45 billion. Anywhere within that range, we feel comfortable that the project will be funded, the Merced to Bakersfield. But again, it depends on what cap and trade comes in. We do monitor that on a quarterly basis. I can tell you as of today, our actual dollars, we're actually coming in higher than what our highest projections are. We should be at about $9.74 billion, and that's exactly where we're at today. So cap and trade is actually coming in a little bit higher than our highest estimate. However, we can't guarantee that, and we do monitor that quarterly every time an auction comes in.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. And can you please walk me through how you determined the anticipated amount of funding that you expect to be available to complete the interim segment?
Sure. So right now we have about $3.5 billion in federal funds that we're very aware of. We have the Prop 1A, $9 billion. We still have about $4.2 billion that we don't have access to of that $9 billion. And then the rest is cap and trade, the auctions that come in every quarter. So part of the challenge of our funding is we have the Prop 1A funds of, again, $9 billion. We have the federal funds of $3.55 billion. But the challenge is the cap and trade, because that comes in on a quarterly basis. And we can't really predict what that dollar amount is. What I can say is we do track it very carefully, and it's actually coming in higher than what our highest projections are. So it is a forecast in our funding, and it is somewhat challenging.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make a comment that I think it's just convenient that the cost of this proposed interim segment is precisely equal to the amount of funding that you expect to have available to 2030. It's not taking any cost overruns into account, or the properties have not been purchased, right, or the right-of-ways haven't been secured. Is that correct?
So that is part of what we discussed about our contingency, and I don't want to get too technical on our P70 and a P10, but the way I look at a P70 is we have a 70% chance of being accurate on our budget and a 30% chance of not being accurate. The way we got to our budget is to add about $990 million of contingency. The way I look at that is it's money set aside for those risks that we know we have mitigations for, but it might not work, or even those unknown risks that we're not aware of. But that's a big part. That's, of the 17% increase in the Central Valley, about 9% of that is just additional contingency funds to mitigate those risks that we're aware of, or that we might not be aware of.
Okay. So I represent the 39th Assembly District, which the southern segment of the rail, the original vision, were to go through. And so can you please explain how this proposal benefits districts like mine or anything south of Bakersfield?
Sure. Well, this is the structure of statewide rail investment. It's always been acknowledged that it's not high-speed rail alone, because we have many areas where high-speed rail won't reach get to those cities. So I've always been looking at the idea of a statewide rail modernization approach, and that's been reflected in several ways, in several new funding programs. Of course, the Cap and Trade program of 2014 set up a new funding program, and SB1 augmented that as well. So when we look across all of the different state funding sources, primarily the Cap and Trade and SB1, along with a little high-speed rail that's the bookend money, Southern California rail investments are about $4.4 billion that we've seen over this past period since 2014. And that includes, again, some of the new SB1 money that's still coming in, but those are awarded projects to improve Metrolink, Surfliner, all those rail services. The Central Valley service Many travelers in the Central Valley will also choose to use the existing bus connection to get down to Los Angeles as well. So some of the travelers coming to and from Southern California would choose to use the Central Valley Rail, as they do today, but at much expanded numbers.
Do you have a projection on how those expanded numbers? Like,
Yes.
how much does this reduce the trip time?
Sure.
You know,
so
anyway.
those people that are riding rail today that pass through or within that Bakersfield to Merced segment would save 90 to 100 minutes of trip time. And the ridership numbers are in the early train operator report, which is on High Speed Rail's website, but at a high level, it about doubles the number of passengers looking across the three services, the Altamont Commuter Express, the San Joaquins would be operating as High Speed Rail, and then those bus connections from Bakersfield to Southern California.
But with the bus connections, are they really saving 90 to 100 minutes?
Well, again, for those existing passengers that would start in Southern California and want to take a rail trip to, say, Sacramento, currently there's, they could go the coastal rail route, and that takes, I think, about 11 hours to get from Los Angeles up to Sacramento. Slightly shorter if you take the bus connection from LA to Bakersfield and then get on the train at Bakersfield to go to Sacramento. So that particular Southern California traveler would see an increase, or a decrease rather, in trip time by that 90 to 100 minutes.
Okay. You know, I noticed that your project update had no alternatives proposed. You know, the only option that you're presenting is the Merced to Bakersfield. You know, as a legislator, I would have liked to have seen various options, like the LAO mentioned. This is now something that the legislator has to consider, but I would like to have seen more options in your project update.
Sure, I appreciate that. Yeah, again, the framing, it was commitments made at the time of the 2018 business plan to look at that valley to valley and look at the build out on either end of valley to valley and how we could do that interim service. Again, through our broader rail modernization efforts, we have done a lot of work on improvements in the Southern California area. There was over $1 billion provided for it's called the SCORE project that Metrolink's looking at for how to upgrade a number of lines, increase frequency to something like every 15 minutes on some of the most traveled lines down there. So there is work being done on those type of improvements as well. And again, they're not dependent on high-speed rail coming into those corridors, but they're mutual benefit projects that the LA Union Station, the Rosecrans Marquardt, when those free up more grade-separated segments, in some cases allow for a more continuous third track, those are all things that improve the existing rail services today.
You know, there is no proposed stop in my district. You know, the rail just goes right through it. And I'm not even sure my constituents would even be able to afford the high-speed rail if there were a stop in the district. And so that's what I think of when I see this project. I think of whether, you know, people, you know, my district is primarily low income, you know, has currently no transit corridors, very little, and most people want transit within the area, within the region, you know, to get to work, you know, this affects their quality of life. But a project like this would disrupt, you know, their lives because we don't know yet, you know, what homes will, you know, which families will be displaced in the district. And so that's where, you know, my concerns are just for the overall vision of the project. But as far as this segment goes, I am also concerned the uncertainty of the federal government's involvement, which I think this project is highly dependent on, not just in the funding or, you know, the federal government as a funding source, but the NEPA reviews that you mentioned in your update originally are supposed to be conducted at the same time as the environmental impact reviews, right? And right now, we don't know if that's going to happen, and if that doesn't happen concurrently, you won't make the December 2022 deadline. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. And for the environmental documents that are currently being updated, and there's two in the Central Valley. There's the Bakersfield area locally preferred alternative, and then there's the Y, which is in the Madera Merced area. So both of those currently, because of federal engagement, are going forward as CEQA first. So there's public hearings and public process on the CEQA side, but without the federal government engaging on the NEPA side, we're unable to go forward with those, and that does create a delay. We do need their re-engagement because we want to clear those segments and the other environmental documents through NEPA. That's the plan with the grant agreement. So, the federal government is interested in holding us to the schedule, but we definitely need their engagement to review the NEPA documents or to go forth and do NEPA assignment, which is a process that the Department of Transportation has in California, where Caltrans is able to act as the federal NEPA lead and certify on their behalf, and that we've applied for that as well to the federal government for NEPA assignment for high-speed rail.
Yeah, I think with all of this uncertainty, not just in funding, but in like the NEPA engagement from the federal government, I don't think it's appropriate that we're still conducting the EIRs for the whole high-speed rail, including my district and the southern parts of the rail plan. Well,
I would just mention that as far as the benefit of doing the EIRs is it resolves some of those route issues, and of course through the environmental process, that's where you look at every opportunity to mitigate and reduce any unnecessary structure is being taken, or try to work with communities to find the best alternative. So in going forward with those, I hope that provides more certainty on routes and that provides some benefit. Also, doing the environmental work can help some other rail projects. We mentioned some of these shared corridors. So in some instances, if high-speed rail is able to clear something environmentally, that subset of that project may be able to go forward under that environmental approval for another project or a smaller subset project.
Okay, well, this is a huge infrastructure project, probably the largest in the country. And lots of uncertainty in funding and federal engagement, which is necessary for this to even be a reality, even for the small segment that is being proposed today. And I think we should have other options for this, this project. And the history of it already, the last 10 years, has been lots of cost overruns. And each year, the public hears the increase in projected budget for the overall project. And I just don't see how we're going to get even our own state engaged in this huge infrastructure project and the will to fund it. So I look forward to more updates and more options for the legislature.